Hello? That works. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Ted Eckers. I'm the president of the Historical Society. This is a very exciting event for us, so thank you all for coming. I wanted to first, before I forget, thank a few people who were instrumental in setting this up. So Jeannie Anderson, one of our trustees, Sue Ainsworth, Bonnie Brinkman, thank you so much for doing this. If you've ever planned an event, you know how much work goes into it, and it was just 2 months ago when we came up with the idea to do it. So this was record time to do this, so thank you. And we have snacks in the back, generously provided by various places around town, Honey and Rye, Nelson's, CVS, Cub Foods, Jennings, Byerly's. So thank you to all those sponsors who provided that. And you can also learn a little bit about the Historical Society, about what we're doing. This is a big event for us, and we're looking to do more programming in the future. So I encourage you to go on our website, on our Facebook page, and just learn about us and kind of keep tabs of us and listen for more programs in the future. Also wanted to thank our kind of big sponsors, Discover St. Louis Park, our Visitors Bureau, very, very generous donation to help us pull this off, so thank you to them. The School District 283, who provided us this space and the setup and everything, so thank you to them. And to the fire department, who brought Molly, the 1928 fire engine out there. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll see it on the way out. That was a lot of fun. My kids are in the back. They had a lot of fun with that. We're recording for community TV, so we're gonna replay this on community TV. It's another thing we're trying to do is provide more programming for the community. So if you had to leave early and want to see the end of it, you can watch it on TV, or if you know a friend, point them to it. And then Emery is here with the camera. He will be taking some still photos of people as they are introducing their item. So don't be surprised if someone's taking your photo. It's just we want to remember the event and kind of get it in the whole production here. I think that is the main stuff. So I was going to then introduce our appraisers from Appraisal Specialists Midwest. We have Bonnie Lindberg. Thank you for coming. I'm going to let you guys do maybe a little intro on yourselves, and James Marinan and Kevin Callahan, who have done events like this in the past, so they know how to run this. They will introduce in a minute, and then I will be walking around the audience, and as an object comes up here, I will find you in the audience, and I'll ask you to tell a little bit about your object. If you already know what you think it's worth, that's helpful to let's not, try to trick the appraisers. If you know something, say something, and maybe state your name if that would be helpful too. So I'm going to hand it over to these guys to kick us off.
We're just doing a little logistics, so it might take a few items for us to get our rhythm going. I am particularly delighted to be here. Jeannie and I have been talking about this forever. This brings back lots of memories. I graduated from St. Louis Park and spent many hours in this cafeteria. And we also had our business, Elaine Galleries, on Excelsior Boulevard for probably about 40 years. So this is wonderful for me to be back. This is, as he said, James Marinan and Kevin Callahan. We have personal property appraising is our business. Not a hobby, but it is a business. We help people with insurance, with estate issues, with sometimes even divorce issues when people are trying to value property to divide or to insure, also to donate. So we see a lot of things. We are not the PBS show that I cannot say their name. So, because it's trademarked. So we don't have the banks of computers to do research, but we've seen a lot and we'll tell you what we know. A lot of times the history of the item is what we concentrate on because it's fun to know when it was from, how it was made. Between the three of us, we have over 75 years of experience of appraising. The value we're going to say today is if you saw it in a shop, or what would you expect to pay for the item. So we're going to use that value, and I think we can begin.
Yes, we have a couple items right up front here.
Mhm.
I see a very lovely collar box, and who does this belong to?
Hello, I'm Nancy Pasco, but I'm here for my good friend Elsie Nisley. She inherited this collar box from her mother, who inherited it from her aunt, who immigrated from Norway to Chicago. We believe that she came in the late 1800s. She died in the early 1990s. She doesn't have any idea if she made it, she bought it, how she got it, maybe she took it. I don't know. She has no idea of the value. It just is charming to her, and she'd love to hear your opinion.
Sure. I'm sure many who are familiar with the popular PBS series Downton Abbey. Well, this is right out of that period. But in this country, I would date it from about 1890 to 1905, end of Queen Victoria's time, beginning of her son Edward VII. It's in excellent condition. I mean, and these are very collectible. I've seen photograph albums with this sort of material, almost like a celluloid on it and with a lacquer work on them. And this one is in impeccable condition with the lining still in it. If I were replacing that, I'm thinking probably about $125, $135. It's in pristine condition. Bonnie collected these sorts of things.
Yes, I have them all over my house. So if this disappears by the, if you can't find it, you'll know where to find
No,
it. Me.
I'm
You
her
can track her
husband.
down.
She doesn't get to bring anything else home.
No.
House is full.
Except that-
Right, exactly. You also brought some photographs of a brass bed, very sweet looking. It has some ribbons and swag decoration on it. Is this a twin or a full? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she brought the. I'm sorry. Tell us about it.
My name is Richard Lang. The bed was my great uncle's bed and my great aunt's bed. I believe it was a wedding present. He was from Italy. They were married in about 1908, and I was fortunate enough to receive the bed.
It's a wonderful bed.
Thank you.
It's in excellent condition, and it still has swag decorations on it. As you can see, people can see here, they have these ornamental swags. And I was going to say, again, it's like the collar box, very Edwardian looking. And if you went to see that in a shop, that's a much nicer design than the typical rounded ones. And I think you'd be looking at maybe about $500 to $600 on that. It's an extraordinary, it's a good example.
Some antiques have actually gone down in the last several years, but brass beds seem to endure.
Yep.
People really love them. And we.
And I would hold these up, but they're a little hard to see. But they're on the table here if anyone wants to take a peek at them.
And whose vase? What can you tell us?
My name is Mary Johnson. I don't know a lot about that vase except that it's my husband, it came from my husband's family and it was his grandmother's, and she came over from Germany. So we think it's perhaps over 100 years old, but I don't really know.
That is a very beautiful art glass vase, and it has a bronze leaf that's scrolled around it as a decorative mount. I didn't see a signature on it, but it reminds me of perhaps a French dome or gallet glass. If they are signed, it makes a world of difference, but still, excellent example from that Art Nouveau period. And I'm thinking about 1890 to maybe 1910 on that, and just even as a type without a signature, I'd be inclined to put that in at about $650 to $750.
It's a beautiful
It's
vase.
an exquisite piece.
Kind of Art Nouveau feeling
Yep.
with that flower winding around it. And whose painting is this? Where did you get it?
I found it at a thrift shop.
Really?
It's by Henry Carling, and I found his grandson on the internet, and he was kind enough to write back and tell me that his grandfather was a great-grandfather, excuse me, was an immigrant who landed in St. Paul, and he started out doing landscapes and then did portraits of business leaders in St. Paul, including James J. Hill. One question I have is about the hole, or if that's difficult to fix. It's up in the clouds area.
Okay. Well, Carling, it certainly was a well-known Minnesota artist. And that hole, we talk about, it's not in the money. I mean, it's not right smack in the middle. And it could be fixed. There are several levels, and you could give me a call and we could talk about who charges what. We can do everything from someone who works out of his home to the MIA. And so value sometimes plays a part in how much you invest in it. But wow, at a thrift shop, where was I? I just did an insurance appraisal on a Carling about that size, and I believe I was at about $1,500 for the insurance value. With the condition, it would be less, but if you were to see it in a gallery. But I think worthy of some investment. Catherine Medici. Whose figure is this?
My father traveled all over Europe and went to school in Russia and in France and collected some of these pieces. He has about 20 of them, and the only place I've been able to find any value was at Bernard Vanneau, who collects some of these. And they're leaden, so I was told they are more valuable. And I have a collection of kings and queens and princes at home.
Did you have any indication of what a value was on that? Okay. This, I mean, I've collected lead soldiers, for example, Britain's Limited, and I know those are popular. This is, like Emerald Lagasse would say, kicking it up a couple of notches. This is very, very nicely done. I would date these maybe from 1910 to 1930, somewhere in there. Nicely painted. Now, it wouldn't surprise me to see one of these $75 to $80.
Yeah. Beautifully done.
Very nicely executed.
I could see these in your house.
Oh, yeah, with the kids, oh boy.
And we have another small figure here. What can you tell us?
Hi, my name is Mark McHenry. I purchased that item at a estate sale. I don't know why, but it was stuck in a laundry bag with clothespins. I wasn't sure about the origin of it. I thought maybe Pacific Northwest somewhere. I think the composition is bone, but I'm just guessing. And I'm not sure if its purpose was a talisman or what purpose at all it had.
Now, this is something where I would say sometimes that little bit of extra research is worthwhile. Was this a clip or a pin of its own type? Because when you say clothespin, sometimes they would take and design things very decoratively in cultures like this that, you know, it was functional, but it was also beautiful. Was it that? I have not seen any quite like this. The face is very lovely in terms of the carving and aesthetically as just a period type piece. And I think this is not a new piece. This goes back at, I would say, about 100 years. And it wouldn't surprise me to see this, let's say, about $250. Now, that being said, if I had this, it would bug me until I found out what it was. And I would be checking on the internet, just for the fun of it. Yes?
Yeah.
Would that be considered a tourist trinket?
I don't know, you know, possibly at that time, to be honest about it, the souvenirs that were done 100 years ago, whether they were sterling silver spoons or postcards or a piece like this, were beautifully done. And I mean, it's not like a modern souvenir that's whacked off from China where there's a zillion of them. These were, I mean, how many people were traveling over 100 years ago?
Yeah.
And so how many of these were purchased and survived? So it's a very nice, I mean, I'm looking
And
at the face.
individually made.
Individually made. You know, these are, it'd be interesting to see what this is and were there other types out there. And that's when it's kind of fun to ding around and say, ah, I found a mate to this, and you put the two together. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the classiest looking clothespin I've seen.
Oh, my gosh.
I can just see a whole row of them on a
Oh, my
clothespin.
goodness gracious.
No, top-heavy shoes.
I know.
Half-gun extras.
Something thick. Whose plaque is this? Mine. Okay. And what is your story?
Hi, my name's Debbie Ornstein. I have two of these. One doesn't have a figure on it. My dad has the other one. They were hanging in my grandmother's house from the time I was a little girl. I think she might have gotten them when she was traveling, but I have no idea what they are. You can see that somebody drilled a hole through the back so they could be hung on a wire, but I know nothing about them.
And it was probably meant to be a wall plaque.
That was a
Okay.
wall plaque. And my suspicion is, well, they are Italian. I would date them from the 1920s, maybe even possibly earlier. Let's say 1910 to 1925. And very nicely done. This is when Italy still had a king, and the quality of work under the kingdom was much better than under the Republic. And I would expect to see this in a shop probably for about $150, $175. This isn't just a touristy piece, it's a very nice piece.
And it is marked. We were trying to decipher, is this a signature or not? And that's where sometimes we're a little bit of a disadvantage because we can't take the time to experiment with different spellings. Just beautiful. Ooh, whose is this?
Better? So, all right, my name is Judy Daniels. That is an English antique biscuit box that when we were collecting antiques, we bought it about 50 years ago. And I really do not know the value of it. I mean, I went online to look it up and it looks like it was expensive. So, thank you.
Well, what we do have here, yes, indeed, lovely. I would probably date that about 1890 to 1910. It has almost a Celtic knot design on it, which is wonderful. It does have the mark A1, which means it was like a Sheffield silver. It's not sterling, but you know, it doesn't have to be sterling to have some value. That is a very elegant piece. What were you paying for that, may I ask, at that time? You can't? Yeah. Well, this is a standalone piece, a very elegant one, and it wouldn't surprise me to see this for about $350 to $500. It is really nicely done. Were they sterling silver? Did they check? Well, if you take a look with the glass, the reason I put on 500 is I saw A1. Now, A1 normally indicates it's Sheffield, which is a silver plate. If it's sterling, I could certainly see that, absolutely. But from my knowledge of British marks, take the glass and when you see A1, then look up A1. That's a real important thing. If it's sterling, absolutely, you'd be talking 1,500 to 2,000. But for Sheffield, 500 is darn good.
And that's where it's important, and what we do is we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges because it can be such a difference in price. And what I love about that period of time is the serving pieces and containers, and everything had style. You know, even though it was functional, it also had style, so it would look great in a cabinet or sitting out on a table.
Now, there were marks on there that you could put Sheffield silver, take a glass, find the maker's initials, and you could probably track it down even to the address. But it's wonderful because it's like a road map.
And we have a wonderful tapestry on the easel here.
My name is Shirley Devine. That tapestry is one of two that belonged to my grandmother, who emigrated from Romania with her family back at the late 1890s. The other tapestry, which I didn't bring, was stamped on the back, Belgium.
Yes.
So that's the only thing I know about it. But they weren't framed. I had them framed myself, so I don't know the origin or the value.
Well, Belgium is exactly right, where these were being made. Rather than being hand done, they were done by a machine. And these were very popular during the 1920s. People were decorating with them like crazy. It's a good example. A lot of them, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to see the front. Very good. It does look like there might be a little bit of fading, which is very typical of what we see. I mean, it's almost 100 years old now, and they've been kept in lighted rooms and such. We're seeing these going now for about $175 to $200 in shops.
What's interesting about them is that, of course, we're now in the centennial of World War I, and 100 years ago, Belgium was just devastated in World War I. And if you ever see the Poirot series on PBS, and Poirot, of course, was from Belgium. Belgium, after the war, had to rebuild, and it was a very popular country over here, and so these were marketed to a large extent to help the Belgian economy to revive. And of course, you have the great looms in Flanders and Antwerp, so it's all part of that heritage.
Oh, we have a little owl teapot.
That is neat. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. This is from my Aunt Polly. And all she told me it was very, very old, and I thought perhaps it came from Hungary. However, I think it says made in China on the bottom. I can't quite read it.
I didn't see anything. Now, sometimes you had things like this made in Japan. I think it possibly is British, and it's an example of Majolica, a very nice example. And so a friend of ours, Pat Miles, the broadcaster, collected Majolica. I think she would have loved this. It's, of course, she might not give a hoot either, but you never can tell.
No! Oh!
Sorry about that one. Totally inadvertent, sure. See, he knows how to call me on it there. Okay.
That's bad.
He is so neat. He has a little itty-bitty chip, but not a lot. I mean, he's got the oak leaves and everything. And I would expect to see him for maybe about $85 to $100. He's really nifty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And where did this gentleman come from?
His name is Oscar. My grandmother named him, I think, because we were afraid of him when we were little.
I would have been.
She said that he was carved from a single piece of mahogany. I don't know if that's true. And that he once had teeth. I don't know if that's true either.
He could have had ivory teeth.
Yeah, that's what she said.
I bet he did.
That's what she said.
Yeah, and I don't think he's Chinese. I think he's Japanese. And he's very nicely done. He is just exquisite with the burls on him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, wow, good quality carving. I think maybe you're looking at about $350 to $450. Exquisite.
He would be scary, though, as a child.
Oh, yeah.
I think I would have been a little afraid of him. And who's he? Oh. Okay.
Oh, a salt. And it has does that have its glass liner?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Let's take a peek here.
So,
I don't know anything about it, except I thought it was a little mustard dish. But I inherited that from where I inherited all the other stuff.
that could be, but it could also have been a master salt.
Master salt, yeah. Because they did that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. Anytime I see a cobalt blue glass liner in them, I think master salt and with a spoon. This one is marked sterling. I'd probably date this about 1910 to 20 also, and it has a nice heavy weight to it. I think you probably pay about 170, 180 for that.
Oh. We have a Chinese chair, and who is the owner of that?
My name's Jacqueline Miller, and my grandmother received that as a gift. One of her jobs many years ago, I would say probably 30s or 40s, she was cleaning a monastery, was one of her jobs, and one of the priests gave that to her as a gift. But there's absolutely no markings on it. But and my mom has it now in her home. But I've never seen another piece like it.
Well, that's if you ever have a chance to see the Bertolucci's movie, I think it was Bertolucci, The Last Emperor, about the last emperor of China. This is Chinese from that period. You had the evil old empress, the Grand Dowager Empress Cixi, who was dying there. And under Cixi's reign, they had a lot of furniture like this, and it was designed as much to be exported to the West as anything else. It doesn't have the simplicity of some of the earlier Chinese pieces. These are like the Chinese version of Victorian. And it's a lovely dragon chair. Sometimes that would have been the man's chair. Sometimes there was a chair that matched it with a phoenix in it for the lady. The carving is exquisite on them, and I think you're looking at probably about $750 to $800 to replace that. They're very uncomfortable, but they're lovely to look at.
You are right. It's scary when you're a child. There's a book, The Last Empress, on Madame
The Grand Dowager Cixi.
Yes, oh boy. She was a piece of work,
Yep.
but fascinating history. Okay, Raymond, where are you?
My name is Raymond Hart. Old homes of Edinburgh, dating back to the 1600s, I believe. There's a letter in there from the marketer, along with the other things in the portfolio. I think there's 7 series, and there's about 4 to 5 etchings of old homes of Edinburgh with the stories about the homes of prominent people from Edinburgh. My brother was an architect going back to the 50s, and he had this in his estate. So I have no idea what the value of them would be.
Yes, I had a chance to look at these, and they do look like they're early 20th century. Unfortunately, they're not the original etchings. They are prints of the etchings, and very interesting, but I think we're probably then more in a decorative mode and value than we are monetary mode. So they're very interesting, and I didn't have a chance to figure out how many, are in each portfolio and how many you have, but I would expect to see the individual images for anywhere from probably 25 to 35. And what I didn't see is if it's an etching, then you can see where the plate indents against the paper, and the paper would have needed to be more substantial than these are. So very interesting, but more decorative. Okay, and we have a candlestick up here.
Okay, that was my great-grandmother's, and I'm not sure when she was born. It's probably 1875, 1880, and it was passed down to my grandmother and to my mother and then to myself.
Is this one of a pair?
You know what? They were 2 different ones.
Yep.
One was a tall one and one was a small one. And
My suspicion is they could be Shabbat candlesticks. Were they from Russia? I think I'm looking at, because oftentimes we find these coming, and it's exquisite, and that's true silver. That is the real McCoy. And I once, for a friend of mine, actually, I put together a pair of Shabbat candlesticks, but they were brass that had been silver plated from Poland. And this one is from the Tsar's time in Russia. And I mean, my suspicion is there's a mate to that somewhere. I mean, but even as a standalone piece, you know, you're finding one of these Warsaw ones goes for, and it's silver plated, goes for about $500 to $600. Is this, are you looking at more like $1,250 for one? That wouldn't surprise me. Now, what if you ever found, and it wishes were horses, beggars would ride, but what if you found the mate? I found one for the brass one, that was common. But if you found one, are you then looking at $3,000 to $3,500? Because it's like putting Humpty Dumpty together again. But imagine the stories that could tell. That's phenomenal, and that it's been in your family has even more special value.
We had the privilege of doing the insurance appraisal at Temple Israel. And so we saw a number of examples of Judaica and silver. It was just a fantastic collection that they have down there. And if you go there, they'll be in the display cabinets, but just wonderful. We have a lovely statue here. Come on down.
That statue came from my mother. My parents traveled in Europe, and I believe they might have brought it back from Italy. But I don't know anything more about the sculpture. Apparently worked for Rosenthal, China.
Yes.
And Fritz Klimsch.
Yes.
So you have that, and it's signed, so.
Yes, and his dates were from 1870 to 1960. Now, I was able to do just a snapshot research. He also did bronze sculptures, and his true bronze sculptures are selling probably in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. But that's a different category of his art. I did see this one, had sold at auction in the last few years, and it had a title of Hochend, and I don't know what that means in German, and it sold for $500. So an auction price is sometimes less expensive than if you saw this in an antique shop. So are you in the $500 to $750 range on it?
Okay, great.
Beautiful.
You know, and I might as well stay up here because of the bell.
Oh, look at this. Oh, God, my granddaughters would love this. Oh, whose little dresser is, oh, that is so charming. Oh, my goodness.
I have to admit that is a very treasured piece.
Oh, good.
My mother was born in 1905, and she received that doll dresser from her father when she was 5 years old. All my life, until 1980, I just saw it in pieces in a box. So it had been played with a lot. Anyway, after my mother passed away in 1980, I decided I was going to have it put back together and refinished. I had the drawers lined, so I used it as a jewelry box. And you might notice that the mirror is a little lopsided or whatever. But I don't know who made the dresser, but my mother came from a farm family, and I would assume it was probably made by a neighbor friend, a farmer. And I was just kind of curious what it would be worth. Not that it's going anywhere, but.
That's a wonderful piece and a great story to go with it. And it's a good example of the arts and crafts period of that time. And of course, Gustav Stickley, oak furniture is popular as it is today. And this one is just a neat miniature of a typical dresser at that time. And good quality children's items like this, and this one is in, again, pristine condition. I think you're probably looking at $175 to $200 on that. It is very nicely done.
Replace one
Yeah, but that's nothing. I mean, this is in wonderful, immaculate condition. And you had a professional job done. See, I always say with pieces like this, if you, well, maybe I don't ever want to be considered arrogant, but I always say, if I don't do it, it won't get done. And that's the same with you with this.
That's right.
And it's like giving the piece CPR so it saves it for another 100 years.
Yeah.
And it doesn't wind up as just a bunch of pieces that somebody discards.
And I think from some TV shows, there has been the philosophy that don't do anything to it. Well, if you didn't do anything to it, it wouldn't exist anymore. And so there's at a point, it's at a point where you are then again adding value to a piece and not destroying the value.
And you know, when you see whether it's on the Antiques Roadshow or what, yes, there comes a time with pieces that you don't refinish, and you don't put a Formica type finish on something from the 18th century. That's common sense. But there are some things I'd like to challenge those that say you never do anything. Can you imagine the condition that Westminster Abbey would be in if nobody ever did any maintenance on it? Just imagine how many times you have visited these places and there's scaffolding all over the place. But if there weren't, they wouldn't be there.
And we have some pocket watches up here. Do they belong to one person or more?
One of them has a monogram on the back, and that is my husband's great-grandfather's. And then the other two were handed down. They're my great-grandmother's, handed down to my grandma, handed down to my mom, and now I have them. And I don't know much, I really don't know anything about them. I'm just curious what you have to say about them.
These are wonderful mementos, I think, of our relatives and people who came before us. I found an extraordinary Reed and Barton silver, it's cylindrical, and it was called a gentleman's dresser, and it has an arched handle with a hook for a pocket watch. So the gentleman would put his buttons or tacks in the little drawers that came out. And so sometimes it's really fun if you have the item to find a display item that would be period to the watch. And then you can enjoy them instead of them being in a drawer all of the time.
I need one of those at home.
No, you don't.
I do.
Who's Belle?
They have a new dog, and would Riley ever like that?
Oh, God.
Oh, 'cause it's me again.
Yes.
I really don't know the origin of that bell. My parents are deceased now, and I know it was in their possession. I don't know where they got it from, but it is signed, so I don't know if it has value or not.
Yes, did they go to Italy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I did.
that's probably, well, it is Capodimonte from Italy. And Capodimonte is a type of pottery and porcelain, and a lot of times it does have all of this decoration on it. They were big on figures and gold and things. And so this probably would have been something you would purchase to bring home to remind you of your trip to Italy. Bells aren't as collectible as usual, or as they used to be, and so we'd probably see this in a shop anywhere from $40 to $60. Okay. Now, if you do watch the Antiques Roadshow, which now I can say in that context, if somebody brings in a big lobster dish that you think is the ugliest thing you've ever seen in your life, it's Capodimonte. And it's worth a fortune. So you can't always judge by how much you like something.
Great. Thank you.
Now, I can address the watches here. I just wanted to check to see what the gold content was. That makes a world of difference. It's just like with sterling silver as opposed to Sheffield. That content is a major determinant. And all of these were gold filled, which was a very high quality gold plating at that time. And I would date them all from probably about 1890 to 1910, late Victorian, early Edwardian. The gentleman's watch is really phenomenal because it actually has a wonderful watch fob, and it has a gavel on it. Somebody was the president of some club or society. And I mean, this would be very elegant to be displayed in a watch stand. I would expect to see this one in a shop, if it's in working condition, probably, well, with the chain, for about $350 to $400. Now, the ladies' watches, one of them has the type of pin it would have had. The ladies' watches, of course, were not carried in a pocket. The ladies would have them pinned to their dress. And this one actually has its butterfly pin. And I would expect to see the one with the butterfly pin maybe for about $115. There's another one without the pin, probably $85 or $90. The pin is nice on that because it shows the context of how that was worn.
And whose work is on the easel?
Mother, she was born in 1906 in Czechoslovakia. Actually, it was called the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And it looks like a needlepoint. I believe it's a Czech boy and girl in their native costumes.
Very charming.
Yeah, it's a wonderful bit of folk art, and of course you just had the conclusion of the Habsburg exhibit at the Art Institute, and this would be kind of folk art from that time. Think of Anton Dvorak when you think of Czech at that time. And I would say I would expect to see this probably going for about $150, $170. Wonderful example of the artwork of that period.
And on the back of it, it has a phone number which is indicative of about 65 years ago.
Yep, when it was framed.
Sunset 5,
Oh.
1522.
Yes, what was it? West 99299, I think was my St. Louis Park grade school phone number. Could I just peek at that one more time? Yes, I would encourage you that if this is something that you want to keep in the family, to have it reframed. Technically, it shouldn't be touching the glass. And you wouldn't even necessarily have to buy a new frame, but they could put spacers in. Of course, it's fairly deep, but it should have some spacers to give it some breathing room and to make sure that you have an acid-free backing, and it'll last another 100 years.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And whose pedestal compote? Oh, isn't that sweet? With the two owls.
The two owls on top. This is wonderful. I like pressed pattern glass. This was, it didn't always have to be the cut glass. We had some wonderful glass makers in this country. Actually, after the Civil War, you had almost an explosion in the glass business industry.
What can you tell us?
Okay, this also came from my mother's family. I have no idea how old it is or how many generations.
It almost has an Art Deco flair for it, but it was a long time before Art Deco came in. I date this probably about the 1880s, maybe even the 1870s. But it has geometrics, almost like geometric fans, and then pyramids with louvers. I mean, very nicely done. And then, of course, the wonderful pair of owls as the finial on the handle. Nice pressed pattern glass and in great shape. I would think maybe about 130 to 150 on this because the size, the owls, and it's in exquisite condition. I wanted to buy one of these at one time. I couldn't afford it.
Who's turtle?
Yeah. The turtle cuspidor.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, he's good.
And we do know what a cuspidor is, don't we?
It's a spittoon.
A spittoon.
Yes. He used to have a tail that you could step on and the cover would lift up, but that's been lost. It came probably from my grandmother's family went to Iowa to farm, and they came from New York, and they brought some very lovely things with them that included in the figurines that are also on the table. So I think it's probably from the late 1800s. I'm not sure.
Exactly. Now, even with the missing tail, if I saw him in a shop at that being said, I wouldn't be surprised to see $250 to $270. Now, if he's complete, and no damage ever, $350 to $400. Now, as a suggestion, you're not going to restore the value, but if you want to have a nice tail made, Brinkman's over in St. Paul could do that for you. I mean, Vern Vanderpool over there is a magician, and he could be very creative, and you could have the tail put back on him. And actually, if you did some research on Google and you found one where they had a picture of the tail, it'd give him a roadmap to finish it. Brinkman's, yep, they're over on Snelling Avenue near McAllister College in St. Paul. They do wonderful, anything to do with metalwork, plating, repairing, whatever.
And I should mention that we have sheets on the table of restoration people that we bring our things to these people. And Brinkman's is on that list.
I'm sorry, ashtray, spittoon?
Spittoon, yes.
Yeah, he's a spittoon. He's really...
Yep,
Yeah.
lifts.
I couldn't quite tell.
Yep.
That's a small, you'd have to be a good shot.
Oh, no. You're right about that. Don't teenage boys practice that? I think
it just comes natural to boys.
Yep.
I think so. There were lady spittoons, though.
Oh, I know.
I have one at home.
They had the little hand models. that
Yeah,
they carry.
and mine is a little bigger. It's porcelain with flowers on it.
Yeah, yours is the fancy schmancy type.
Okay, we have some figures here. Yes.
I was told that those also came from New York, it would have to be late 1800s. There is no marking on them. The only thing I can find similar online has nice marks on them.
See, these are like figures. They're beautiful bisque figures. My suspicion is that they are like royal ducks from Bohemia. And oftentimes these were put on pianos, like you'd have smaller piano babies, but you'd also have these on pianos and on mantles. They'd have them on a mantelpiece. You'd have one on each side. They date from probably about 1880 to 1890, and I would expect to see a nice pair like this probably for $230 to $260. Now, if they were marked, again, big difference, then you could be moving that up to probably $400 for a pair. Oh, yeah, no problem. You take like a Dawn dishwashing detergent, but you put them in like a plastic tub so there's no way to get chippies on them.
Mm-hmm. And a moderate temperature.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Warm, but not too hot.
It's amazing how they, yeah, exactly.
Okay, I can't see something with one of these without hitting it.
Ooh, that has a nice tone.
That's a nice tone. Whose is that?
So the three that I brought came from my grandpa. I don't really know much about them. I don't really know where or when he got them. But I've had them ever since he died back in early 2000s.
Okay.
I just know I used to hit that thing after I finished a beer in college.
They're wonderful. Look at the patina on that.
It's a drinking game.
It's a drinking game. Oh, wow. The Gong Show. Wow.
Oh, no. Oh, that was bad.
Remember that? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But this is very nice. And I think it was Chinese from the late 19th century. Maybe about, let's say about 1870 to 1900. And those things for a long time were not being collected, but now the Chinese are aggressively going to buy things like this back. And this one still has the gong with it. I mean, how many of them have survived like that? One of this sort, and again, very simple, traditional design, I would expect to see in a shop for, the range would be about $450 to $550. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
And whose piece is this? Okay.
It is by Charles Mosley. He's an English poster and advertising artist. He did a series of 25 of these color lithographs for a wine organization in France. I looked up his signature, though, online, and it doesn't appear to be his. I'm not sure if that was what somebody just wrote in when they framed it. Also, the other examples I see online don't have that inked title of each vineyard on the bottom. I have 8 of them of the series.
Did you purchase them, or?
I found them at Goodwill.
Oh, okay. I haven't had a chance to look him up. I'm not familiar with him, and I certainly wouldn't say that I know every artist. It looks like it is something that would have been used as a promotional piece. Maybe he was even at the winery and signing some of these. I didn't see a number on it in terms of number 1 of 50.
I read just online it was a series of 100 done.
Okay.
And there were 25, and there are 100 sets made.
Okay. And it looks like it's a serigraph, which would be a silk screen process rather than an offset lithograph. And I will make a stab at this. I could certainly do more research on it, but I would expect to see something like that. I mean, wine is popular and the image is good. You know, would we find something online on this for somewhere between 50 and 75, just without looking up the artist? Did you find anything for sale?
Yeah, I did, but it was in England, and I'm not sure how that relates, or if it was, like I said, it didn't have the title on the bottom, and I'm not sure how it compares.
After we're done, I'd be happy to see if I could find something on it.
Thank you.
Wonderful bowl. Whoops. Whose bowl?
I don't know very much about that bowl, except that my grandmother was a world traveler, and she gave it to my mom, and my mom gave it to me.
Okay, so your mother traveled extensively, and you received it from her.
That is a wonderful Japanese imari bowl. I would date it from the Meiji period, about 1868 to 1912. Emperor Mutsuhito. Wonderful period. After Japan Incorporated got started at really 1868 after the fall of the shoguns, they aggressively were marketing to the West, and they were doing some just lovely, very finely done work. Now, imari, you can have some very ordinary types of pieces of imari, and it was really more the name of a port than anything, but it was a term that was given to describe this sort of colored ceramic. And this one has the Japanese, the imperial chrysanthemum on it, just exquisitely done, and even with a lobed base with the chrysanthemum. I would expect to see this. Now, there is a chip. I can see that on the inside. You're aware of that. And that, let's say if it didn't have the chip, you're probably looking at replacement value, I think, somewhere $240 to $270. Now, for this chip, you're not very far from Mr. Salick, Steve Salick, who's on our list here, and he loves repairing Oriental things, and he does an excellent job. Has been doing it for many, many years. I would recommend getting this bowl into Steve, and you probably won't see it for 3 months, but when you see it again, it'll be wonderful.
Thank you.
And we have a lovely screen down here.
A folding screen. Oh, wow, wonderful. Oh, wow. Oh, my. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's what we all think. But anyway, this Oriental screen was given to me by my grandmother, who was a collector of Oriental art. She was written up in the Las Vegas Times in 1955 for her collection. This happens to be one of the pieces that we have. And anyway, I have no idea what the value is, but I do know that it comes from a well-respected Chinese collection.
I certainly can see that, and I'm looking at the back of it here. Beautiful lattice work panels. You've got 8 of them. Beautiful, fabulous carving. Again, I would date it from that reign of the Grand Dowager Empress Susi. You're probably looking about 1870 to 1900, and really nice quality. I mean, with the brass insets, the whole thing. And I'm just saying, off the top, from if I were insuring that, I might be starting at, well, let's see here. I would say about $2,000 to $3,000. I mean, it could be more, but I mean, it's a work of art.
Yes.
And you look at the carvings at the top of the crestings with the dragons and the cranes and that, and these things for a long time were disparaged, like all Victorian, whether it was Chinese, Victorian, American, or European. Now, the Chinese, again, are aggressively looking to buy things back like this. Could be more, and especially to a well-heeled Chinese collector. And that's where maybe a little research might not hurt to do, because this is getting into the realm of artwork.
Right. Okay, so then, and you, if we would come to see you, you would be able to, you know, if we pay you, but check into it?
Yeah, then that's what we do. Again, we don't have the banks of computers here like we normally would.
No.
And I'm saying from a number of things I've seen, but yeah, then you can tweak it and fine tune it and say, oh my gosh, this is much more. Because you find an exact comparable or something very close.
Okay, that sounds great.
It's a really terrific piece.
Thank you.
And Bonnie's doing a little research on some art that came in after, and so James could address that piece.
Ooh, isn't that nice?
Wow. Ivanhoe. Now this is interesting. What does it say here? About this, oh, this is a wonderful piece.
What can you tell us?
Again, I don't know much about it.
Okay.
It was my grandmother's.
That's a good example of English virtually. It's a flow blue type, and it's from the series of Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe. You have medallions here with figures from the novel Ivanhoe. For example, they have Richard Coeur de Lion, Richard the Lionheart, and others famous figures from that romance by Sir Walter Scott. Exquisite, and you know, blue and white, and it's a covered dish. That, it wouldn't surprise me to see this for $350 to $400. Now, if it didn't have the Ivanhoe theme, are you maybe looking at $200? But that Ivanhoe theme, it's like Royal Dalton, where they would get into themes dealing with, you know, literature, Shakespeare or what. That's going to create a whole different level. This is a great piece. I dated probably about, I think about 1880 to 1900. Thank you.
Thank you.